we shall continue to discuss about removing of false views, or removing of wrong views, or removing of conceits, and removing of attachments during the practice of mindfulness meditation or Vipassana meditation. So there is no removing of wrong view. If one thinks that I see with an insight, or with my insight, there's only there's removing of wrong view. If one realizes that only formations, see formation with insight, or comprehend, realizing mentality and physicality clearly. So in order to realize that there's only formation, see formation, one must develop sharp mindfulness, precise mindfulness, and deep concentration. So similarly, there's no removing of conceit. If one thinks that I see thoroughly with my insight, I see well with insights. Usually one will become conceited, or has a lot of pride. When one thinks I could see thoroughly, deeply, with insight, or my insight knowledge is very penetrative. But if one realizes that there's only formation, see formation with insight, or comprehend, realizing clearly the process of mentality and the process of physicality, or there's a process of phenomenon and a process of awareness, or the noting mind, then one will be removed, or will be removing conceit at that time. Similarly, there's no ending of attachment. If one is very pleased or happy, satisfied, very pleased with one's own insight, and able to see clearly with my insight, and I'm enjoying watching the movements, very pleased with the smooth feelings of the movements of rising, falling. So then there will be attachments arising. But if one realizes that there's only formation, see formation with insight, or comprehend, realizing that there's a process of physicality, or process of a physical process and a mental process, which is the process of the noting mind, or there's a process of object, and then there's a process of the mindfulness noting mind. Then there's the ending of these attachments, or removing of attachment at that moment. So, in other words, this is known as overcoming or removing the three kinds of obsessions or obstacles to the progress during the practice. So in other words, only when meditators gain insight knowledge, realizing the three common characteristics of mental and physical phenomena clearly. So by these realizations, these three kinds of obsessions will be removed at a time. So how does one remove wrong view or false view, conceit and attachment during the practice? So attachment here also means craving. So when one could see that there's no self, if formation was self, then it would be right to take them as self, but they are not self, in the sense that this one cannot exercise control over them. There's no power to exercise them, exercise control over them. So when we meditators can't exercise control over the process of the formations, and they are impermanent in the sense of non-existence after having come to be. So I have explained the definition of impermanence, suffering, and no self or not self in the previous talk. So impermanence means non-existence after having come to be. Then they are painful in the sense of oppressions by the instant arising and passing away. So we can't exercise control over the process of formations. For example, when there's a sound appear, definitely consciousness will be arising, perceiving the sound. So we can't exercise control over the arising object consciousness when the conditions are met. There are various conditions give rise to the arising of the hearing consciousness. Sound is one of the conditions. The space is another condition. If there's no space, then it's not possible for the sound to travel to the ear door. There's a ear sensitivity, and then there's a contact with the ear door. So when all these conditions are met, then there's arising of the hearing consciousness. So this is a process of formation. So if one is endowed with a sharp mindfulness and deep concentration, then there be arising of a consciousness, knowing the arising and passing away of the hearing consciousness. But here, in terms of the mindfulness meditation, we say that there's a rising of awareness or mindfulness, perceiving the arising of the hearing consciousness, and then the passing away. So if one is endowed with sharp mindfulness and deep concentration, the mindfulness or awareness, or the consciousness of knowing the hearing consciousness will be arising naturally. There's no meditators or self to make it arise, or to make it or to make this awareness or mindfulness to arise. So this is another formation. When we explain in the conventional language, we might say that meditators realize the insight knowledge of impermanence when they could see the arising and passing away of the object, the hearing consciousness, and the noting mind or the awareness. So there's a insight realizing the passing away of the formations. But this formation is not being seen or realized by a person, by the self. It's being realized by another formation. So there is no self or person behind the arising of the mindfulness or the awareness. In other words, the consciousness that knows the arising and passing away of the hearing consciousness. So meditators come to realize these formations are not permanent. The consciousness or the mindfulness that noted the arising and passing away of the hearing consciousness, that consciousness is also not a permanent process. If meditators are endowed with sharp mindfulness and deep concentration, they may realize that there's another consciousness arising, perceiving the second process of formation. So that's why we say formation, only formation, see formation with insight. They are painful in the sense of operations by rise and fall. So meditators can only realize dukkha when they can see or realize constantly and continuously the instant arising and passing away of mental and physical phenomena. So, or in other words, sankhara or formations. So, in that way, there's removing of wrong view. Similarly, there's a removing of conceit. If one could see that the formation are impermanent. If formation were permanent, then it will be right to take them as permanent. But they are not permanent, they are impermanent. They are impermanent in the sense of non-existence after having come to be. So non-existent means when the conditioned phenomenon has passed away, it does not exist anymore. Sometimes meditators might have the notion that an object of phenomenon which had passed away a few minutes ago now is arising again. Actually, when the object had passed away, that means it ceased. So that's why the commentaries sometimes explain that non-existent, or sometimes say that not being existent, it comes to the being and then ceases. So before the arising of any phenomenon, that phenomenon does not exist somewhere, but because there's a condition, then this phenomenon is arising. So only when meditators keep on experiencing correctly the characteristics of impermanence, then they will understand better and better. So they are impermanent in the sense of non-existence after having come to be. They are painful in the sense of oppression, oppressed by the constantly because of the instant arising and passing away of all the conditioned phenomena. They are not self in the sense that it's not possible to exercise control over them. The commentaries say that they are not self in the sense of no power being exercisable over them. In other words, meditators can't exercise any form of control over the arising of any phenomenon. They can't exercise any control over the passing away of the phenomenon. Then there's removing of attachment or craving. If one see that the formations are painful, painful means suffering. If formations were present, then it would be right to them. It would be right to take them as present. But they are painful in the sense of oppression, by instant arising and passing away of all these conditioned phenomena. They are impermanent in the sense of non-existence after having come to be. they are not self, in the sense that one, in the sense of no power being exercisable over them. So, in other words, we meditators are not removing these three kinds of obstructions or obstacles to the progress separately. It's because if meditators has penetrative knowledge, realizing thoroughly, completely, for example, the characteristics of impermanence, then they will be realizing the characteristics of dukkha, painful, suffering, and anatta, no self, at the same moment. So the scriptures say that when one sees one of the three characteristics clearly, one also realizes the other two characteristics at that moment. So similarly, when one is able to remove false view and wrong view at that moment, then conceit and craving or attachments are removed at that same moment. So in other words, there's removing of false view, wrong view, when one see the formation as not self. There's removing or overcoming of conceit in one who see all this formation as impermanent. So if one could not realize formations or conditions, phenomena are impermanent, then this feeling of conceit will arise. Then there's a overcoming or removing of craving or attachment in one who see the formation as painful or suffering. So this way of overcoming the three kinds of obsessions or obstacles to the progress, or papancha and pali, is known as tatanga pahana, in Pali. That means with the arising of insight knowledge into the true natures of mental and physical phenomena, the defilements or these three kinds of obsessions are removed at that time. But when the mindfulness is not sustained and concentration is getting weaker, then the experience of insight would disappear. Then these obstacles, defilements can arise again. So the commentaries explains tatanga pahana with a simile. It's like the rising of the sun in the early morning. Then the darkness disappears. So the light dispels the darkness. When there's a sunset, darkness appear again. But this way of overcoming obstacles and defilements of Tathanga Pahana will pave the way to the attainment of Samujjeda Pahana. Samujjeda Pahana means uprooting the latent defilements by path knowledge. So if meditators could not attain Tathanga Pahana during the practice, then it's not possible to attain Samujjeda Pahana. So we have to rightly understand the practice. This practice leads us to the realizations of Lokuttara Dhamma or supramundane Dhamma that consists of four stages of path knowledge, or 4 stages of fruition knowledge, and Nibbana. So there are two types of truth. One is known as ultimate truth. The other is known as a conventional truth. In the teaching of conventional truth, the Buddha explained that there's a person, an I or you. This language is used in commons with everyone. There's a being, and so on. There's a self. The Buddha used conventional language to explain certain teachings. For example, karma. So one shall experience the results of the karma. Then the Buddha also explains the ultimate truth. In the teaching of ultimate truth, there is no self, a person, or being. There is only Nama-rupa, or mental and physical phenomena, or 5 aggregates. So if one could realize the ultimate truth, then eventually one will be able to attain enlightenment, be free from the cycle of birth and death. We have to understand there are these 2 types of truth. So during the practice of mindfulness meditation, Vipassana meditations, this practice lead us to realize the ultimate truth. So that's why we have to realize that at each moment there's a pair of processes. There's an object, then there's a process of mindfulness or noting mind. The object could be a mental object or physical object. So there's no self behind these processes. So that's why the commentary explained that there is suffering, but none who suffers. Doing exists, although there is no doer. Extinction is, but no extinguished person. That means there is no one or self attain enlightenment. Although there is a path, the path here means the Noble Eightfold Path, but there is no goer. There is no one going on this path or walking on this path. So similarly, meditators have to realize that there's only formation, arising and passing away during practice. But it's not easy to go beyond the concept or the conventional truth. Most, as long as we have not realized clearly the ultimate truth, then there's always clinging, clinging to the concept, clinging to the body form, which we think this something real. The body form like a substance that we can feel it real. But in the ultimate truth, this body form is not real. It's insubstantial. So during the practice of mindfulness meditation, meditators have to keep the mindfulness constant and continuous. If there's a thinking, there's no more mindfulness. When there's a reflections on the experience, there's no more mindfulness. But sometimes it's not easy to go beyond thinking or reflecting. Meditators at the beginning are quite concerned or curious about their experience. Sometimes they have strong desire to know their progress or to know the experience. So the meditators, either consciously or unconsciously, reflecting on the practice or analyzing, judging one's practice. For example, is my mindfulness strong enough? Did I concentrate well on the object, and so on. So as long as there's thinking about the experience or reflecting, looking back one's experience, even the experience that experience that gained a few seconds ago, and so on, then at that time there's no more mindfulness. So it's important to mindful and not thinking about one's own experience or reflecting on one's own experience. One may reflect on the experience at the end of retreats, or sometimes one needs to go for interview with the teachers. One may recollect or reflect on the experience 10 minutes or 15 minutes before the interview. is because when one begins to think about the experience or to reflect on the past experience, then there's no more mindfulness. There's no more experience of the ultimate realities. When one begins to think of the experience or reflecting on the past experience, then the concept will arise. So this concept hinder to the realizations of the ultimate realities or ultimate truth. So it's important to mindful and note constantly, continuously. In fact, if a meditator is endowed with clear mindfulness and deep concentration, if the meditator has gained a good experience at that moment, that good experience will be staying in the mind naturally. Just like in your experience of in your life, when you have some experience, the experience will leave a clear impression in your mind. So similarly, in the practice of mindfulness meditation, when meditators have gained clear experience, that experience will stay in the mind. Meditators will not forget about the experience. So when meditators have gained more and more insight knowledge, then the obstacles, obstructions, or the three kinds of obsessions and other defilements also will be getting less or weaker. But they need to put forth effort on striving diligently, constantly and continuously, in order to attain path knowledge. Path knowledge has the power to uproot the latent defilements, anusaya kilesa. So in other words, when meditators are practicing mindfulness meditation better and better, and gain more direct experience or personal experience into the true natures of the mental and physical phenomena, then the defilements will be getting lesser and lesser or weaker and weaker. So in that way, they will live more peacefully in their daily life. They could cope, for example, with the vicissitudes of life better. In the teaching of Buddha, one of the discourses is about is a vicissitude of life. There are 8 kinds, or sometimes it's been summarized into 4 pairs. Or these vicissitudes of life is also known as 8 winds, or 4 pairs of winds. They are gain and loss. The second pair is praise and blame. The third pair is fame and defame. The fourth pair is pleasure and pain. we are encountering all these vicissitudes of life very often, frequently. But one who have gained good experience in the practice of mindfulness or Vipassana meditation will be able to cope well when encountering or facing with the vicissitude of life. The mind will become more stable or in more equanimities when encountering vicissitude of life. So it's important to develop mindfulness constantly, continuously. When meditators could develop mindfulness constantly, continuously, and the mind is free from these obstacles. The mindfulness is free from the wrong view, free from conceit, free from craving or desire. So when meditators could sustain this mindfulness, when this mindfulness free from wrong view or false view, free from conceit, free from craving or desire or attachment for some experiences, then there's a progress. That itself is progress. Sometimes some meditators are very concerned about the progress, especially they have some knowledge about the stages of insight knowledge. Sometimes they have knowledge of various stages of insight knowledge. Then they would be looking for it, thinking about it, searching for it in the practice. So when there's a strong desire, looking for it, when they think that they could not get it, then there's a feeling of frustration, disappointment. The mind is defiled by their desire or attachment to the experience. So when there's this desire, attachment arising, then the practice of mindfulness is defiled. So the practice of mindfulness is to overcome attachment, desire. But meditators have a strong desire or develop strong attachment to certain experiences, then it becomes a hindrance or obstacles to the progress. Mindfulness is one of the mental factors or mental concomitants in the teachings of the Abhidhamma. It is known as beautiful mental factors. So it is mindfulness is defiled by one's own desire, wrong view, conceit, craving or attachment, then there's no progress. But if one can develop pure mindfulness, which is free from wrong view, conceit, craving or desire, attachment, then there's a progress. So when there's a progress, eventually meditators, you realize experiences of insight naturally. So meditators have to overcome these three kinds of obsessions or obstacles and other defilements during the practice in order to realize the ultimate aim of the spiritual training, that's enlightenment.